Hello everybody and welcome back to M&J Games. I am Michael and today this is going to be a quick tutorial on how to make some nice sloped paths that look more natural. And so as you can see, like I'm not going to try to say I'm perfect at this. I'm still kind of getting better. But as you can see, this one's not perfect, but it is still a little bit, it looks more like a natural kind of slope to it, especially when you look from this view. And, you know, same thing there. It's got a kind of nice level slope to where it's not too crazy in terms of an incline or decline. Now that's maybe a little bit too much because I've kind of made this earlier on in my park. But you know, just kind of trying to learn how to kind of slope the terrain a little bit to kind of match the pathing system you're wanting to use and so forth. And so I did that again a little bit over here. You know, just trying to kind of have it look more natural. And so let's kind of open up a sandbox and let's get started with this tutorial. Alright, so I'm going to show you a couple of different tricks here, and I want to preface this by saying I am by no means feel like I am the best at this or anything like that. I'm just trying to share some of the knowledge that I feel like I've learned from this. And so, you know, what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to elevate terrain to kind of, so let's say we end up having this flat portion up here that we kind of want to get everything to work up towards in a sense, right? Now, it depends on what size path you're using as well, right? And so the initial default setting is just to have nothing happen, meaning the path just kind of goes with the way of the terrain, okay? The issue with that is obviously you get some ripples and some stuff that you don't necessarily like. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a piece of path there. Then I'm going to place a piece up here. Now, it's not going to connect, but if you go over here to settings, you turn on flatten terrain, and then we go back, that might not connect, but if I hit it to two pieces like that, it connects. But look at the issue. It all of a sudden automatically flattened out part of this, and then also it kind of creates these really kind of awkward ridges right there. So let's actually do one more thing. Let's do this. Alright, so now you see how we do have elevation. The actual elevation part is smooth, but you see how it's up a little bit, awkward stop, up a little bit, and it's kind of like these rapid stops, right? So what I'm going to do now is, and let's turn flatten terrain off. Let's go that to 1. So I'm placing these pieces where I want to have, where I ultimately want the terrain at, okay? So if I do flatten terrain on, so if I wanted this path, but you see how there's kind of a lot of awkward kind of movements to it. Now this part's not as bad, but it's basically not sloped at all, and then it has this slope here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually delete this, except for that first piece. Now I go into my terrain, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to smooth it out. Now sometimes this works really well, sometimes it's not as much because it ends up like kind of over smoothing some stuff. What I'm trying to do here essentially is I'm trying to smooth out the path that we're walking on to try to create as smooth of a natural slope as possible. And we all know the pathing in this game just is not the best. So to get this perfect is really, really tough, but the idea is that you want it smooth enough, okay, to where nobody's going to notice. Now, if we turn flatten terrain off, and let me just go back to one piece at a time. So now, as we're moving it up the terrain, so that's a little bit more natural, isn't it? Now, it still has the kind of big drop off here, but because we smoothed it out, it doesn't have as sharp of a break. So that's actually, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. If this was something that I was working on, I would probably keep it like this, exactly. You know, this is a little bit steeper of an elevation, but doesn't have that drastic go straight, instantly go down, then all of a sudden straighten out again. So I don't really like using flattening terrain for my final kind of for ultimately the final look of the slope. I just like having that to kind of start forming the slope, and then I kind of smooth it out and work from there. So that's kind of one way you can go with it. Now the other way, and this is a trick I saw Mike Sheets do, and there's somebody else on the PC. This is a tricky one. I haven't really done it too much, so I'm not going to sit here and try to, I'm not going to take that much time with this. So it's not going to be absolutely perfect. And even if you work really hard at it, I don't think you'd be able to get perfect. You just kind of work with it. So the idea is you want this slope, and I'm just going to put it at 3 degrees, because normally if you have slopes in a park, except if it's a place like like Silver Dollar City, you don't really have massive hills, right? They're kind of natural, small slopes and so forth. Actually, let's make these paths wider. So let's just say something like this. Now, for you to get it perfect, it's going to take a lot more than what I'm going to show you here, but I'm just kind of trying to show you the general kind of concept and idea. So now you're going to want to raise your terrain, and I'm just going to kind of go like this. Let's turn intensity down, because the idea is we want the terrain to be raised up to where it's just slightly, ideally if you can still see the rail, but that's really hard to get completely. But that's actually pretty good so far. And I kind of messed up there as I got a little bit too eager there to try to kind of speed this up. Like I said, I have not fully used this concept yet in a park, just because it is tedious. It does take time. And I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like I'm an expert on it. I have used it a little bit, and I'm just kind of trying to introduce you to this idea to where maybe this is something that you would want to do. So the idea is you want to fill up the entire track. And I know it's like they say ideally, or at least Mike Sheets was talking about leaving that, having it where that piece is still visibly seen. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to smooth all this. And so for that, let me actually turn the intensity up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise this up so that I can see those supports. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place, sorry about that, my controller died. Yeah, so I'm just going to place a piece there. And so that's what I'm using these track supports for, is to figure out where to place the pieces of path. So I'm just placing them up there on this hill. I mean, most parks you have aren't going to have this big of a slope, because then it's going to be hard to kind of mask everything else. So now what we do is we take this and we actually turn the flattened terrain on, or at least this is the way that I go about doing it. And you'll see why in a second. So we do that. There. Now you might say, well, that looks awful because this is what you're saying not to do. I understand that. But now what we're going to do is we are now going to delete all of these. And we are now going to smooth out the terrain. So it's essentially the same process as before. So now what it's hopefully doing is it's hopefully smoothing out the terrain to everything around it, so that this slope is a little bit more, like it still might not be perfect, like you can see up, but it's trying to get it a little bit more natural. And like I said, I mean, for you to really, really get this good, like it's gonna take time. It's tedious. It's a tedious process. And I'm not great with this, but I know kind of the idea. So now So now there's a slope. So it's not perfect. Like I said, you still gotta work out some of the kinks. That's kind of the idea is, and so like, let's say for example, that we didn't want that long of an elevated slope. You just want it to be like right here, right? At least from there to that part, that looks fairly natural. It's not perfectly smooth, but it does look fairly natural. So that's one way that you can kind of try to work with creating slopes and stuff like that. But this one, I am happy with how this one turned out. It's just a matter of kind of using the smoothing tool and kind of working with the terrain a little bit, as well as the pathing system. But like I said, this is more just like a basic tutorial for it, nothing trying to go too crazy with it. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there are any other tutorials you'd like for me to do for you, or to have on the channel. And thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with the content we release, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.